After spending an unreasonable amount of time in the Hell Is Us demo and picking apart pretty much every bit of information I could find, I've got a much better sense of what the game is, and more importantly, what it isn't. So let's dive into 5 things we absolutely know to be true about Hell Is Us, and 5 or more things that we don't. Okay, so the first thing we know is that the game is definitely not a Souls-like. In fact, it's not even close. After playing through the demo, the best way that I could describe the combat is that it plays a lot more like a hack and slash and includes all the usual combat mechanics you would expect to see in a melee-focused RPG. You have your light attack and your charged heavy, but interestingly, no regular heavy attack. On defense, you can block, and if you time the block correctly, you can parry and drain the enemy's stamina bar, leaving them open to one of these cool God of War style finishers. But the parry definitely didn't seem like one of the game's core combat mechanics, so if you're a player that's perhaps a little bit more parry averse, I imagine you'll still be pretty comfortable just using the regular dodge. You do also have a trusty drone that'll act as a sidekick that'll come with its own unique set of abilities. These abilities will expand as you progress through the game, making it something that will seemingly be pretty vital to helping you in combat. Now, another mechanic that seems to be lurking under the surface is the game's Limbic system, which is something that has the potential to really help set the game apart. We don't yet know much about this system yet, but your Limbic meter is the white bar you'll find right underneath your health and stamina. From the demo, there isn't really much you can do to interact with it, but you will see the more you charge your heavy attack, the more Limbic energy you use. From some extended looks, this bar ultimately seems to be tied to the protagonist's mental state, with indications being that it could affect your stamina and your overall damage output. So I like to think of this kind of like your mental energy. The more mental energy you have, the more powerful your attacks will be, and the more stamina you'll have. On the flip side, when you're low on mental energy, you'll be a little bit weaker and everything will just feel a little bit more sluggish. Now, what's hinted at is that this system has the potential to impact enemy behaviors and even exploration, potentially revealing some hidden paths. Now, to the extent that this system is integrated and woven into the overall gameplay and story, we don't yet know. But I think there's a couple of different pieces here in the combat that could potentially work really well together and give us something that's ultimately really unique. Now, another thing we have some good insights into is the overall weapon variety and customization. You start out with a sword, but quickly gain access to the double axes. From extended looks, we also know that you'll gain access to a pole blade or a longer spear type weapon. Each of these different weapon types complement a different playstyle, with the sword being your more balanced option, the dual axes favoring a quicker, more aggressive playstyle, and the spear, well, we just don't really know that much about it yet. And we still don't really know the extent of the weapon variety. How many different weapons of each type will be in the game, and does each weapon type really lend itself to a different playstyle with its own special abilities, and whether or not each weapon feels mechanically unique or is just cosmetically different. Now, another layer of the combat that we don't really know that much about yet is the elemental damage. What we do know is that elemental affinities do exist, as we've seen some extended gameplay that features what looks like fire and maybe lightning. What we don't know is if these elements are strictly tied to each weapon, or are they attached through glyphs, which are the special items that can be equipped to the different weapon slots on your datapad. We also don't really know yet just how deep this system really goes. Are the elements just flat damage bonuses, or will enemies have real weaknesses and resistances, and just how many elements will actually be in the game? I'm also curious to see how these elements tie into the different puzzles and just the overall environment. Will certain elemental abilities be required to solve certain puzzles? Because if so, I think that could make things really interesting and definitely adds a layer of depth to the game. Now, another big question mark we have is the game's overall level of difficulty. We know that right from the start, you have the choice between 3 different difficulty levels. There's lenient, which promises a more story-driven experience, balanced, which is a mix of challenge and exploration, and merciless, which is for players that want a more serious combat experience. In the demo, I played through the game on the hardest settings, and I can say that it really wasn't all that challenging. I did die a couple of times, but I never reached a point in the game where I thought that I had to bump the difficulty back down in order to progress through the story. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the game is going to be easy. Reviews suggest that the game's real difficulty lies in denser enemy encounters, environmental hazards, and puzzles that will challenge you mentally and force you to use your trusty drone in creative ways. Now, along the same lines, we still don't really know what to expect in terms of boss encounters. We haven't seen any boss fights either in the demo itself or from any of the extended gameplay looks. Now, it is possible that boss encounters just come in a bit later, but it seems more likely that the game leans into more elaborate gauntlets of enemies rather than traditional boss fights. Now, one big question that is on everyone's mind is the game's overall length. For From what the developers have shared, the main story is expected to take anywhere between 25 to 30 hours. Now, my understanding is that this is specific to the main story and doesn't include completing all the side quests and collecting all the things the game has to offer. So if you're more of a completionist or playing on a higher difficulty, that amount of time could easily double. But some early reviewers have posted online saying that they've been able to finish the story in closer to 15 hours, which is a pretty significant gap, and raises the question that maybe 25 to 30 hours does include all of the side content. What we do know though is that the world is designed to be semi-open, so exploration is really going to matter. If you're the type of player that likes to dig into every side path and optional quest, you'll probably land closer to the higher amount of playing time, whatever that ends up being. But ultimately, your experience will vary significantly based on how you decide to play the game. Now, another thing that we don't know is if the issues that we found in the demo are final or if they're going to be fixed before launch. Performance-wise, my run on PC was really solid. I didn't run into any major bugs or glitches, but there were still just a couple of things that felt a little off. First was just the overall movement. The character to me felt really floaty, like he doesn't have much weight to him when running around, and I've seen other players on forums mention the same thing, so this definitely wasn't just my experience. This is something that I eventually kind of just got used to and even tweaked some of the sensitivity settings on my controller, which did seem to help, but I think that's the kind of thing that new players are really going to notice right away if it isn't fixed. And my second big issue was the game's lock-on system. Locking onto a single enemy worked just fine, but switching between targets felt really clunky. Sometimes it wouldn't switch at all, and other times it would switch when I didn't want it to. Even after turning off the auto-targeting in my settings, it still just didn't feel as responsive as it should. And since the game throws so many of these multi-enemy encounters at you, including linked enemies and just full-on hordes, smooth target switching seems like it's going to be a really important aspect to the game. So if this isn't fixed before launch, I have a feeling it's something that a lot of players are going to have a problem with. Okay, so those are 5 things we know and 5 or more things that we still don't know about Hell Is Us. But what do you think? Are you going to be playing the game when it launches on September 4th? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe, because when the game finally does launch, I'm going to have a ton more Hell Is Us content that you are not going to want to miss. As always, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.